What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to another Mount Rushmore edition of the Smark Moment Smack Talk podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tony Mango. Joining me, as always, are Callum Wiggins.
Big.
And Robert E. Fleece.
Yo.
I thought you were going to go with tall. Big, tall, and everything in between. That's what we're talking about for today's edition. We are finally getting around to a fan suggestion of the Guy123 had requested a few times about doing the Mount Rushmore of super heavyweights in WWE, and I guess technically pro wrestling history. We don't have to necessarily be WWE, although somebody like myself, I'm going to focus more on that since I know more of that. But, you know, when we get to talking about somebody like Vader, for instance, we're going to talk more about his WCW career and so on and so forth. So we got some big guys to talk about for this edition, and we haven't settled on this quite yet. Maybe we end up just doing what we end up typically doing with Mount Rushmore, where we end up going, oh, you know, a secondary list is this, a third list is that. Nowhere near that one time where we did like 25, but we might kind of expand on this and make it not just the Mount Rushmore of super heavyweights, but maybe the Mount Rushmore of big men in pro wrestling, because then we can kind of separate, okay, super heavyweights versus the tall guys versus, you know, a combination of them. We're going to have to see how this goes based off of the people that we discuss. And as always, while we discuss these things, we want to know what you have to say. So even though you can't chime in while we're doing this, we're not doing this live, and, you know, cast your votes or anything, you can still tell us what your Mount Rushmore list would be and who you agree or disagree with, or who you think should be on like a B tier, or, you know, anything else that's along that discussion line. And while you're over there and you're leaving that comment, hit the like button. That helps out quite a bit. Hit the share button if you want to pass this along to somebody that you think might be interested in checking out the podcast, and, you know, kind of show your support in those fashions that you would do with any other YouTube channel that you like. Also, make sure that you are subscribed and you ring that little notification bell. That way, if we do go live for this, or, you know, how next week we're going to be most likely doing a live pay-per-view point for ROH Death Before Dishonor, then you know when we go live for that. I mean, it's immediately afterward, but hey, you know, then you know when we actually go live instead of that 5-10 minute window. But let's get into Mount Rushmore here. And if you've never checked out one of our previous editions, it's pretty simple, actually. You know, there's 4 faces on the Mount Rushmore monument. We got to pick the 4 faces of whatever the theme is. And since this is super heavyweights, we're obviously not going to be talking about Rey Mysterio or Sensational Sherry or, you know, anybody. I don't know why I went with those 2. Really, out of all the names.
I fought for Sherry on the women's one all those years ago.
Maybe that's why just having a flashback to that. But we will be talking about people like Vader that I had mentioned, and all sorts of other names that you probably do know, maybe a few that you don't know. Maybe once in a while, you know, Cal will mention somebody who's like a legendary person from like New Japan or whatever that I've never heard of, or Rob will bring up somebody from, I don't know, like a MLW or Impact or whatever that I'm like, yep, never seen them or whatever. But hey, we fight for who you know, and then we end up deciding on this. We're going to end up debating and figuring out what our 4 main people are, and any other supplemental ones if we end up deciding to put that on there. So, I don't have a list set up ahead of time. Like, sometimes I like to, you know, here's a list of like 20 different people or so. But let's just kind of start the discussion randomly. I guess I'll bring up the guy that I mentioned earlier. Vader is somebody who I think could very well be a candidate for this. He's a former multi-time champion. He was the top guy for a while in WCW. He's an absolute monster, athletic as hell. Big fan of Vader.
Vader to me is the epitome of a professional wrestler. Like, if you tell someone, what is your stereotypical vision of a wrestler? It is a gigantic man in a mask that goes grr and says, I'm the man. Vader is so good at what he does. When you see the footage of him in Sting and Cactus, I've been watching a lot of Vader and Cactus recently, actually. He's just so good. Obviously, the WWE run was not what it could have been, but even that, you know, he's got the memories of him with Michaels and the memories of him, you know, throwing around a Jake the Snake. Vader is the epitome of big man wrestler, and that's not even talking about his Japanese run, which is where he really made his name and had amazing matches with Stan Hansen knocking his eye out and just so much stuff. Vader absolutely has to be in the discussion.
Yeah, I can't really add much more to that beyond the fact that he was super athletic for a guy of his size. I mean, the moonsault off the top rope is the biggest example of that. I mean, guys at the time that he was doing that weren't really doing moonsaults in general. So to see a guy who was 400-pound plus doing it was just an absolute marvel. And he had such an interesting look and gimmick, and he walked like a monster. He talked like a monster. Absolutely destroy people across every continent and promotion that he appeared on. Yeah, I think that Vader is one of the most impressive and intimidating big men in wrestling history.
And the thing is, outside of a lot of the names that we're going to be talking about on this list, because, you know, we're going to mention names like Andre and Yoko, and Andre and Yoko are amazing for their size, but they weren't. Vader could actually go out there and wrestle anyone and make it a compelling, believable match.
I mean, he had the ability to do like athletic moves that people half his size still aren't able to do. Yeah, I mean, the moonsault alone is crazy. And that's not the only thing that makes it be like, okay, well then that means he's definitely on the Mount Rushmore. But the guy has the accolades to back it up too. He wasn't just somebody who was kind of a gimmick. He did that one move and then that's the end of it or anything. He had great matches. He ended up being a compelling character. It really is a shame that he didn't get a better deal in WWE. He should have been a champion.
And honestly, like, he was also a crossover star. He was also on Beneath World. You know, like, he was a huge deal.
I think he is one of those people that we should at least put in that maybe pile already.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the likelihood that we won't come back to him is very, very low. I'm looking at a list of some different people's names. Some of these I'm not familiar with, like Happy Humphrey.
So Happy Humphrey is is recorded as the heaviest wrestler in wrestling history. I think he was in his heyday. He was 750 pounds.
Yeesh.
Yeah. So, and apparently, that certain people like Harley Race have put in their book when they talk about him that at certain points he was closing in on 1,000.
God damn.
So, but yeah, he's obviously not someone of major repute beyond the fact that he is regarded as the heaviest wrestler of all time. But yeah, I mean, he toured around, he did a lot of the NWA stuff, so he wrestled some major names, even if he wasn't a major name himself.
I got some of the other names that, for instance, I couldn't really speak on. Uncle Elmer. I really don't know too much about Uncle Elmer.
Flyboy Frazier, big Memphis wrestling guy, came over to WWE in the beginning of that like Saturday Night's Main Event era. He had one of the only successful weddings in WWE history. I guess that counts for something. And he's not someone I'd put on the list, but for certain people of a certain region in a certain era, he was a star.
Crusher Jerry Blackwell.
Have you never seen the AWA Wrestle Rock Rumble video?
I don't think so.
Okay. Jerry Blackwell, big guy, lot of the same here. For certain people of a certain era, huge deal. I think he is one of the only people to have turned down Vince McMahon in favor of staying with the AWA.
Yeah, essentially, he was the guy that AWA turned to replace Hulk Hogan as the top babyface.
Ah.
Yeah, Crusher was a huge star in the AWA. Obviously, his run like ends with the AWA. He pretty much doesn't go and to do anything significant after that because his run with the AWA ends in '89. He passes away in '95. Sorry, he was injured in a car accident in '94, and then he passed away due to the accident in '95. So yeah, he didn't really have much of a wrestling career beyond that. So he died age 45. So yeah, not much of a life beyond wrestling. But yeah, but still like a huge star for at the time probably the second or third biggest American wrestling promotion. So certainly going not to be sniffed at. I don't think he's going to be on the list, but definitely a big star at the time.
As we go along here too, I want to put it out there. If we've got the ability to do it, it would make sense to do. I'm looking more at these lists. I'm looking at 30 best big men in wrestling history from WWE.com, Bleach Report article, another one on the Sportster or something like that. I do think that probably the best way that we could do this is a list of super heavyweights, a list of big men in general, maybe a combo list, and a list of worst, but maybe not the combo list, kind of depending. So I would submit this person under the potential for the worst, Bastion Booger.
Now, he's a guy, fucking Singh, who was huge in Canada. Like, he was a really big territorial heel, and then he went to WWE and became a monk, a drunk monk, it rhymes, and became Bastion Booger with a hump on his back. Because reasons, you know.
Yeah. He got really screwed over when he came over to the US because he becomes obviously Bastion Booger and Friar Ferguson, but it was he actually did some decent stuff with I think his name was Norman the Lunatic or Norman the Maniac, and did some decent stuff in WCW. It was a bit more of like a I think Mick Foley says that he attributes some of the elements of Mankind to Norman the Lunatic.
Never seen any Norman the Lunatic stuff. I can't say.
It was in WCW in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, that's a total blind spot for me on WCW.
But he was the it says here, I'm just checking his Wikipedia profile, so Mike Shaw, the actual guy behind Bastion Booger. From 1986 to 1988, he won the Stampede Wrestling North American Heavyweight Championship 3 times, defeating Owen Hart and then losing the title back to Hart pretty much. Yeah, so he beat Owen Hart for that title. He fought, like, the last time he lost that title was to Don Morocco. So he was a big name in Canada.
Let's see. I don't know if you guys could hear that. Somebody's doing something in the hallway. They're having a horrible time. Let's talk about somebody else that we had been brought up. Yokozuna. Fantastic. One of my favorite super heavyweights. And I'm kind of exposing my errors, of course, when I talk about, say, hey, I don't know much about, Uncle Elmer, or for instance, Gorilla Monsoon is on this list for some people, but to me, Gorilla Monsoon just doesn't register as a wrestler. He registers as a commentator and president of WWF. So that's really showing my bias, but I guess we'll lump him in if you had anything to say about Gorilla Monsoon as well. But Yokozuna is definitely somebody that I would put in at least my maybe pile, if not my top 4.
Yeah, Yoko is amazing. At his heaviest, he was over 600 pounds, and he's still safely dropping legs on people. Like, there are, people who are, not twice his size, but half his size and even smaller that aren't as safe as Yoko could be. So, yeah, I think Yoko is one of the best big men of all time, just based on sheer stature, and what he was able to do with it. He's also, surprisingly, one of the only WWE examples of the successful monster. Like,
Won a Royal Rumble, 2-time WWF champion.
Like, realistically, he won a Royal Rumble, and it's the most realistic Royal Rumble winner of all time, I think. The guy is 600 pounds. How the fuck are you going to get rid of him? You don't. He wins, obviously, especially coming in at a number like 27.
Especially when his opposition is trying to pin him. Fucking Randy Savage.
And then just that for the visual of he eliminated a guy from the floor. Like, Yokozuna is one of the best examples of a WWE big man ever.
And I personally love his character. I love the idea that he is a Yokozuna from, he's not from Japan, but it's like, he was a Yokozuna in Japan. You've got Mr. Fuji, which was a great pairing. You got Jim Cornette, which I always love. Camp Cornette is something that not many people talk about these days, but I loved that back in the day. I liked his team with Owen Hart for that time frame, that they were the tag team champions. It's really a shame, again, that he didn't have, however many more years left in the business, and it ended up not being better off like that, because people still speak highly for Yoko. I'd put him in at least the maybe pile. I'm at least putting him under Vader right now in that little section.
As far as Monsoon was a huge deal in his day. He had the boxing exhibition with Muhammad Ali. He's a fairly big deal, but I think for most of us now, he's remembered as the friendly commentator and president of the WWE on camera. But Gorilla was a big deal in his day, and he definitely deserves to be mentioned, but I doubt he makes the Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, I kind of don't have very much to say on Yokozuna in general, because I wasn't watching at the time. I haven't revisited that era with any kind of real relish or anticipation. And every match I have seen of Yokozuna, I've been thoroughly bored by.
Really?
You know what you can say? He was big.
Yeah, he was a big wrestler, but like, he's just a plodding big guy in the ring. He's probably more athletic due to the fact that he was the size that he was. He can move around fairly freely, but it's not like I've watched, like, the main matches that I've watched of his are the matches with Bret at WrestleMania.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those I find pretty dull. I mean, let's put it this way, you find it quite hard to pair someone up with Bret Hart and have a worse match with him. So, and the match in WrestleMania 9 in particular, I mean, he's blown up after 6 minutes in that match, and Bret has to pretty much like drag this 600-pound guy to a halfway decent match with a shitty finish at the end of it.
I think that Bret and Yoko had their best matches on live events, which I've seen some of. And I think for as much of a spectacle as it is, Yoko being able to have any kind of match at all with names like Bret and Taker, and have it not be just the worst things you've ever seen. Because is Bret versus Yoko good? No, but I certainly wouldn't put it on any of the worst matches I've ever seen. Like, again, I think he does deserve those kind of kudos. But again, not sure if I'd put him on the list.
So at the very least, I could see there. I mean, we still have plenty great people to talk about. So it might not be Yoko for his time, but.
Well, I'll just put it this way, and again, it definitely shouldn't be taken about the same conversation. It just shows how much I've seen compared to obviously what you guys have seen. But I probably could count more great Khali matches that I enjoy than Yokozuna matches.
Well, let's talk about Great Khali, because he is somebody who I would at least temporarily put on that potential worst list, because he sucked.
I think when he came in and he just like massacred the Undertaker, it definitely worked on me as a 12-year-old. I was like, oh my god, like, this guy they're letting this guy just beat the shit out of the Undertaker. That means something. Because even in 2006, like, people were already barely touching Taker, and Khali got to decimate him. I think the luster wears off quickly and he becomes more of a comedy character because big man dances is funny. You know? See Shanky. But I liked Khali for his time, and he gave us the Punjabi prison match, which may be a positive, maybe a negative. I don't really know. But it's a different match type. It was only brought to us because of the great Khali.
I definitely wouldn't class Khali as one of the worst of all time. I know it's weird to say because we do sometimes pick on him, and the fact is he wasn't a very good wrestler. He couldn't talk at all or anything like that. But at the end of the day, he was just there to be a giant, and that's kind of what he was. And he had some decent matches. Like look at the match with Cena for WWE Championship. That's a last man standing match. He then also had a really good last man standing match with the Undertaker as well on SmackDown. So I think in the right circumstances, with the right opponent, he could have a decent match. And towards the end of his run, yeah, he was just a comedy character that was just there because he was really huge with the Indian audience. Even that pertains more value than certain other big guys that have been in the company and just really didn't add anything in general beyond, just, oh, wow, look at the size of them. Maybe, I don't know, someone can get them up in a big move and that looks super impressive.
I wish Khali was around in the time of the 24/7 title. I would have liked to have seen him win it and then just kind of hold it forever because who's going to beat a 7-foot giant until R-Truth pins him while he's sleeping? That kind of... I think that could have been really fun for him. And yeah, he's not the worst by any means, but he's not making my Mount Rushmore.
Well, who would you guys potentially toss out there for the worst?
Mabel.
Oh, come on.
He fucking sucked.
All right.
We get to talk about Mabel. You know what's going to happen eventually anyway.
Mabel, Viscera, Big Daddy V, however you want to refer to him.
The world's largest love machine?
Yeah, he was an absolutely terrible wrestler. He was way too overweight. And I know that a lot of these guys are going to be big and overweight. But the fact is it really restricted his movement. He was awful to look at. It was just... Yeah, he'd wear these giant romper suits, whether he was Mabel or Viscera. And then when he's Big Daddy V, you saw his tits hanging out of his, his one piece over the top. Just, yeah, it was really, really disturbing. And I don't recall a single good match he ever had. Obviously, you could count on the, that match with Kevin Nash at SummerSlam. Arguably the worst main event in SummerSlam history. Yeah, I just don't think he was any good in anything that he ever did, and was only there because he had a unique look and was that big. And you can get Vince McMahon on commentary saying like, "Oh my God, look at the size of this guy! Look at the size of this Mabel. He's a behemoth." And it's just like, yeah, but he's absolutely he's just stinking up the place in every match that he's involved in.
You believe he was the second person to pin the Undertaker after Hulk Hogan? It just really makes you think. But I don't know how much more I can add to what Callum said there. I'll just add, whoop, there it is.
I'll add whoop, there it is. I can't make a case to argue that Mabel was great. He wasn't.
Look, Mabel... It sticks out like a sore thumb when you're talking King of the Rings. That's why you almost never see his picture there. That's why they go from Brett to Owen to Austin. Because what can you really say? Mabel existed because everybody needs a giant to slay in the world of Vince McMahon. And that was Diesel's giant to slay. Mabel sat on his back. It almost got him fired. He broke the Undertaker's orbital bone, which, cool mask aside, is not very good. Yeah, I can't say anything positive for Mabel, unfortunately. So I think we can move on.
Now, I'm thinking when it comes to the worst that we do a combo thing because it's easier to do worst of big men in general than super heavyweights, worst of tall guys, then kind of thing, whatever. So 2 people that are definitely in contention for worst big men that qualify for big men, but they are not super heavyweights under the same, Vader, Yokozuna kind of mentality that I think we're going to get no pushback on to potentially add to this list. Eli Cottonwood and Giant Gonzalez.
And Giant Gonzalez does count as super heavyweight. He's for over 400 pounds.
Yeah.
He is?
Yeah,
I thought he was like maybe around just a little bit above Undertaker.
The bodysuit makes you think that he was ripped.
Yeah, it definitely makes me think that, right?
But yeah, I'd say those 2 definitely fit. I mean, Cottonwood, mustaches,
He doesn't have one, but his is the best.
Yeah.
What is that? Why do people remember that?
Because he didn't do anything else memorable.
Because Tony remembers all this shit. He remembers every Bam Neely match move for move.
Yeah, it's so weird that you can't name something that Gorilla Monsoon did, but you're like, oh, fucking Bam Neely, hell yeah!
But yeah, Eli Coleman is definitely a contender for this. He just. Absolute shit. In that one NXT season, I think there might be bigger fish to fry in that regard. Like at the end of the day, his run amounted to a couple of months in an NXT competition that barely anybody watched,
and it sucked.
Yeah, it did suck.
But I mean, those couple of months were terrible with him.
Giant Gonzalez definitely is a bigger contender for that. Because he wrestled in multiple promotions. Obviously, the feud with The Undertaker is the big one in WWE. But yeah, he was absolutely terrible. And the whole bodysuit thing and all of this stuff. Yeah, he is way worse than Great Khali.
I'll tell you something that both of them would really benefit from between Eli Cottonwood's mustache that doesn't exist, that is amazing, and all that weird ass body hair that they had decided to put on that bodysuit for Giant Gonzalez. Both of them should have been taking advantage of our sponsors, Manscaped, because they really need it. You go over to manscaped.com, you can browse their different things that they've got available. You can see some of them on your screen right now if you are checking this out on YouTube. And you can also see on the screen that if you use the promo code SMARK, you get 20% off and free shipping on whatever it is that you are ordering. You can pick up something that can trim that body hair, like the Lawnmower 4.0, or you can get the Weed Whacker for the nose hair, because I'm sure those guys would have been really just in need of a trim up there. Or you can get the other things like the deodorants and the body washes and the toners and stuff. A little bit of a heads up as far as, I always like to give a little bit of a, sustainability approach to this too. My Lawnmower 4.0 finally 2 days ago lost its charge. I don't remember the last time that I charged it. It might have been when I originally got it practically a year ago at this point. So you don't even have to bother to deal with that. I left it on there. It's probably going to be charged for the next 2 years or something at this point. But that has still been the best trimmer that I've ever had. And my wife constantly steals my deodorant from this because she loves that so much. She's going to place an order for another one of those, if not 2 or 3 or something, just to get a bunch of them in bulk. And she's going to use that promo code SMARK too, because that's what you should be doing. 20% off and free shipping. Why wouldn't you take advantage of that while you can? Go to manscaped.com, browse their sites, pick up something like the performance packages or the platinum package if you want to get the biggest amount of things in one lump sum. They got some new boxer designs as well too. Pretty cool looking, I would say so. And they're comfortable too. So, go ahead and pick that up. And to make sure that you let them know that we are the ones that sent you, remember to use that promo code SMARK. You save money, and we get a little bit of a bonus from that. The fact
That's
that
right, because when you're using Manscaped, you don't want to be hairy like Giant Gonzalez. You want to be completely freshly shaven like King Kong Bundy.
Let's talk about King Kong Bundy. He is somebody who has been in the main event of WrestleMania 2 in the cage match against Hulk Hogan. Never was a world champion. So that's something that dings him in the sense of, okay, well, if we're talking accolades and everything along those lines, he never won a title. So it puts him less likely in that positive range. I have a little bit of a soft spot for him, just on a personal bias, because he is the brother of my former gym coach. So the fact that that's
Jersey's
like a
small, huh?
What's that?
Jersey's really small, huh?
Yeah. The Pallies are all over the place. It's like, oh, don't you own a car dealership, and aren't you a gym teacher, and aren't you a vice principal, and aren't you King Kong Bundy? You know, but I can't say that King Kong Bundy would get a vote for me to be on the best.
I love Bundy. Bundy's awesome, but like the 5 count,
very cool.
Such a cheesy gimmick. I enjoyed the match with Hogan at WrestleMania 2. I think Bundy was great for his time, but it's another one of those. Does he stand the test of time as one of the best of all time? Probably not.
Yeah, I think he sits comfortably in that kind of mid-tier range, which is, yeah, he wasn't anything super special. I mean, he did get to appear in that match with Hogan, so you could always say that he was in the first ever WWE Championship match at WrestleMania.
That's so weird.
That's so crazy. Such a weird statistic that you would think like, oh, you know, who is the first, whatever. And
yeah, so he has that going for him, and yeah, it's not like he was anyway bad, but I just don't think that there's enough memorable moments associated with him. Like the one that springs to mind outside of the match with Hogan is I can't remember who it was against, but it's like where there was the mini Bundy.
Well, in WrestleMania 3 he had a match with a bunch of little people.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah. It's funny he went from Hogan to that. He's also part of the legendary streak. One of the only people, him and Gonzalez, in fact, that the Undertaker did not tombstone at WrestleMania. And yeah, Bundy's great, but I'm not putting him on the list.
I'm gonna speed run through some people that are not necessarily in the super heavyweight, but in the big men general category that I just got a feeling that we're probably not going to have too much to talk about. But just to say some names. So stop me if you do want to talk about them. Quincy Elliot has not even been on TV outside of NXT Level Up, so there's nothing really to talk about there. We only saw Giant Zangier one time. Nothing really to say on that. Shanky is not somebody who is on a best or a worst at this point in my mind.
Tony, are you not getting Shanky with it? Come on
now. Commander Aziz. Nothing really to talk about yet. He's big.
He's big.
If we're going to do the Mount Rushmore of people who are big and some other people aren't, I mean, he definitely would be in there, but...
He's in the running here. Colby Carino is not. That's just what it is.
Omos right now is the de facto big guy in WWE, and he's actually doing pretty well for himself. I mean, he's a former Raw Tag Team Champion, and he's gotten some relatively big wins, but he's still at a range where I wouldn't put him anywhere close to... I mean, I could rank 15 people over him easily. There's I lost my track of where I was at right now. Giant Baba. Any discussion on him?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, he's a huge name in Japanese wrestling.
Like, he's one of the top people associated with Japanese wrestling.
Yeah, he was the head of All Japanese Pro Wrestling,
which was the big company for quite some time.
Yeah, it was bigger than New Japan for a while. And it's still going. Obviously, he's not part of it anymore, but it's still like going strong. Definitely a considerable number 2 behind. It might not even be number 2 right now because you've got like Noah and other places as well that are bigger in Japan. But yeah, him himself was it was him and Inoki.
Mm-hmm.
They were the 2 big stars of Japanese pro wrestling at that point in time. So I'd say Barber is a big potential to be on this.
Yeah, I just like
big men.
You think about he was an NWA World Champion, Phantom switches or not, he was champion, and he deserves. I think he's a strong. Maybe he might even be above Vader for me. Like he might deserve to be on this list.
Well, he's not a super heavyweight. He's a big man. Again, that's this weird differentiation we're getting between the 2 of them.
Well, how much did he weigh?
It was just around about like the early side of 300.
All right.
So what are we kind of, I mean, I guess technically when we get to picking, we might have to clarify, but what are you thinking around like 350 plus? Super heavyweight?
Super heavyweight's 350 plus, big men are 6'6" or 6'7" over.
Okay. Does Matt Morgan constitute as a big man?
Yeah,
I forget what how tall he is.
Fuck off my list.
He will not. Yeah, but he will not be going on any of the.
You wouldn't even put him on the worst?
No, because he's not terrible. He just was never that good.
Bland.
Yeah, bland as hell. But yeah, so he's like an average one.
It's a shame. I liked about like a hot minute's worth of, because I hadn't seen him in WWE, but when I was getting back into wrestling and everything, and I was tuning into Impact, I was just like, all right, let me see what this other wrestling company's got going on. And I'm like, the Blueprint, Matt Morgan. This guy's tall, and maybe there's something there. And then it didn't really work. But for a hot minute, I was like, oh, that could be like a big important thing. I thought the same thing about Rob Terry. I thought the same thing about Crimson for like even less of a time.
Is Hogan big enough to go on this list?
I would think. I mean, the technicality, I don't know how tall Hogan is, but I would think that Hogan could potentially be under the big man list.
So Hogan's 6'7".
Oh, then there you go.
But it depends. Like, do we class that as 1 inch below the cutoff point, or are we going to go with 6'8" and above? Like, because Hogan seems a bit of a weird one to incorporate this, even though he is obviously huge. It doesn't feel like I never would class him as a big man, but he is big.
I mean, he was the Metallica bassist. He slammed the 2,000-pound Andre the Giant. Hulk Hogan's done it all, brother. What do you...
See, I would say that he's probably somebody that should be in the discussion, but that I would probably fundamentally pick for big men over him just because they symbolize being a big man more. I don't know about like, it depends on each particular list, but a lot of times with the Mount Rushmore, to me, I'm going to focus less on who is the overall bigger star or the better in-ring performer if I think that they fit the theme a little bit better. You know what I mean? So like if I think big man, I'm going to think Undertaker more than Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, and I think Undertaker default is a Mount Rushmore big man.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if we need to bother even discussing him, but obviously he's not a super heavyweight in the same sense as some of these giant guys that we're talking about. But I'm just going to put him in that list. We'll talk about him when we get to debating whether or not he gets one of the four or not, because he's fucking Undertaker. We've talked about him a million times. Same thing with Kane. I think that we could pretty much easily just be like, all right, he's in the discussion. There you go.
Mark Henry.
I am a bigger fan of Mark Henry than most people are. I can't, of course, be like, here's the 20 best matches that he's ever had, because I'm not like that for most people anyway. Even like Shawn Michaels, I can't name 20 off the top of my head. But I have always been like, man, people crap on Mark Henry too much. And I was so fucking happy when he won the world title. That's what he does. He's a fucking big man. He's a super heavyweight. Love Mark Henry. I would at least make a discussion point for him.
Yeah, I'd put him in the maybe pile. I think he was phenomenal. I think he's a great example of really taking a long time to hone his craft, but once he's there, it's like, yep, that's it. That's the potential. That's what you could have been doing. The Hall of Pain run is top notch.
Yeah, Mark is great promo. Again, it's not like he was pulling up any trees in the ring, but he was pulling up trees probably in real life because of how strong he was. I mean, he was legitimately the world's strongest man. So I remember seeing that clip of him lifting up the I don't know what they referred to it, but it's in that Arnold Strongman competition, that ridiculous dumbbell which only has like this really short grip attached to it, and him lifting that over his head, and that being a great moment. Like him pulling cars and trucks on TV when they were really pushing the world's strongest man.
He bends like pots.
Yeah. They tell that story. I don't know who it was, but they say that there was a story backstage when someone got their locker stuck, and they looked at Mark Henry, and Mark just rips the the door off its hinges, just like when they were just going to go try and get like a crowbar or something. And then there's that infamous moment. Obviously, it shines a good light on Henry when they were supposed to gimmick a steel cage door for him to get through to, I think, when he was feuding with Batista at the time, and they didn't gimmick the cage door well enough, and so he had to legitimately rip a steel cage door off its hinges to get into the ring.
Fucking nuts.
Yeah, it took him several minutes to do it, but he did do it, and that's like no ordinary man could do that. Yeah, Mark's great, former world champion.
Undertaker, I think, is what who had said this one other story too, where there was some kind of like traffic jam, or like there was like a car that was like in the way of whatever, and everybody just looked at Mark Henry and he just fucking moved the car. Just like, all right,
did enough for the bus to get around, and then just put it back.
Like, who the fuck does that? There are some people out there that are like, man, this is a heavy gallon of milk. And he's like, I'll move that car. Love Mark Henry. And of course, you're talking about like other moments, like specifically the fake retirement is easily one of my favorite promos that I can remember from the past like decade or whatever.
That salmon jacket.
That got me. I was just like, oh man, he's retiring. This sucks. Like, he's getting a second wind to his career and everything. And, you know, at least everybody's being respectful. And, John Cena's coming out. That's cool. Whatever. Then he's just like, nah, fuck you. I got more left in the tank. I'm like, yes, win every fucking championship. Give him the belt, you know? Big fan of Mark Henry.
Let's talk about some athletic big men. We've obviously mentioned Vader fitting into that category, but there are plenty more that have, like, essentially do stuff that you wouldn't expect a guy of their size to do. And there's 4 names that immediately spring to mind for that. But obviously we can discuss all of them individually. But it would be Bam Bam Bigelow, Umaga, Rikishi, and Keith Lee.
All people that I'm a big fan of. Bam Bam Bigelow, of course, he is one of those guys that is perpetually on my list of, man, I wish they would have given him a world title. Just
Bam Bam Bigelow, if he was around today, would be tearing it up in AEW.
Yeah.
And like, Bam Bam Bigelow's fantastic. I think easily underrated. Also did a 400-pound moonsault. Also tagged with Vader in Japan. Bigelow's the man.
Yeah. I remember, again, I wasn't watching at the time, but I've gone back and seen the fun stuff he did in ECW with Taz. Like, so he was technically a world champion, just not in WWE.
Yeah, true.
ECW, but he was just unbelievably athletic for a guy of his size. He moved around well. He took moves as well as gave them out. And yeah, I think that he was probably ahead of his time in terms of that super athletic big man, to the point where they probably didn't know what to do with a guy that could do what he did. Just like, it's one of those things that we hear about when it's like, we need to put you back into like big man wrestling class or whatever, because you're supposed to just walk around, do moves pretty slowly, like soak up the atmosphere. You're a big man. You're not supposed to be this high flying superstar, but he decided to do that stuff, and it was really, really cool. And it had such a brilliant aesthetic as well, with the flames in the back of the head and the outfits that he wore as well. He was, larger than life in every sense.
Yeah, he was one of those guys that kind of what Rob was saying earlier about Vader. You know immediately, all right, this guy does something like pro wrestling, and I will not fuck with him at all, because he is going
that
to...
old, like, airplane, like, I walking through an airplane, you look at Bam Bam Bigelow, tattooed head, and all that shit, you're just like, you're either in a gang, in a band, or you're a wrestler, and I'm not gonna fucking bother messing with you. And that's more of what I wish we saw today.
Really quickly before we move on to the other 3 that you have mentioned, Man Mountain Rock, as far as being in a band.
I don't know whether he classes in the bad one, but like, he's certainly not in the best one or any of that.
So like, he was Foley's tag team partner, and they had a good little run in WCW, and then he went to WWE to play guitar, which honestly, if someone was on eBay was selling like guitar just because it looks pretty cool with the old WWF logo.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Like, but no, I don't think about Man Mountain Rock a lot.
Yeah. Now, Rikishi is somebody who another whole generation could have been like, why didn't this guy win the world championship and whatever. I tend to think a little bit less so than Bam Bam Bigelow based off of the eras that they were in. Rikishi was overshadowed by some other people, but Rikishi was still fantastic. He was a colorful character. He could move in the ring. He was fun to watch, had a long career in WWE, spanning from, the Fatu days all the way through, where he was Fatu with like the hip hop sort of gimmick, which was fucking terrible, but hey, they were trying something. And Rikishi, that's where he reached his peak. He's memorable at the very least for rubbing his ass on everybody and everything like that, but that doesn't get you on this list. I think that he is worth being in the discussion for just longevity at the very least.
At the end of the day, Rikishi's in-ring ability was overshadowed by his ass. And that's really unfortunate. But you gotta give him credit too, because like he did the head shrinker bit, the stereotypical I'm Samoan, I'm a savage, blah blah blah. He tried to do the I'm Fatu, I want to make a difference, which looking at now, I can totally understand why in 1995 or whatever, someone's pitching, hey, let me try to be a positive influence, but also do this, trendy hip hop thing. Because as we would see with Too Cool, it was very much who he is in some ways. And then, of course, Rikishi was great. And he came in as a heel big man because, again, everybody's got to be a monster in Vince McMahon's world. They did the Too Cool thing. He started shaking his ass in people's faces. And I believe, honest to God, he's in the Hall of Fame by himself, specifically for the stink face. But he is in the Hall of Fame by himself, and I think that means something.
Yeah, he was super, super over. The entire Too Cool stable were just immensely popular in the height of the Attitude Era. And he was a guy that could move. You could throw those savate kicks. He moved at pace whenever he was like charging people in the corner. Obviously, the stink face is the memorable signature move, but he did a cool variation of stuff like the Banzai drop was a fucking lethal finishing move, like essentially just like a pole driver, but with a lot more finesse put into it. And like he would just man on people with his ass, but that's it. The ass was over. That ass was over, and that really, and that just signified his entire career. And there's plenty of memorable moments, like the 2000 Royal Rumble immediately springs to mind. Just that, the dancing with Too Cool in the middle of the match, and then clotheslining both of them out at the same time. That was awesome. Of course, when he did it for The Rock.
Yeah. The Superfly splash off the top of the cage. Yeah. That's fucking impressive.
And also, it's like he's the Intercontinental Champion, multiple-time Tag Team Champion. So he does have accolades.
Yeah, technically speaking, he has more accomplishments to his list than somebody like Bam Bam Bigelow.
Yeah, I think he was, I wouldn't say like one of the biggest stars, but he was definitely a star of note during the time that WWE experienced its most, or at least at that time, the most profitable years, or the years where they had the most viewership they ever had. So I'm pretty sure more people could probably tell you who Rikishi is than Bam Bam as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think he's definitely in consideration.
I'll preemptively say he's more than likely going to be somebody I'm looking at in my B or C tier, but I do think that we need to come back to his name. Similar wavelength, Umaga. You mentioned him. Short time frame as Umaga. I mean, he was in the Jamal and Rosie tag team situation. I don't think Rosie's somebody that we're going to talk about anything more. But when he became Umaga, massive level up, became Intercontinental Champion more than once. I forget if it's 3 times or 2.
2
times. Had a big spotlight match at WrestleMania against Bobby Lashley for the whole Who's the Worst Billionaire or whatever it was.
I wonder who'd win that competition now.
I think it'd be a no contest. But he is another one that they could have very easily had him beat John Cena. He could have been a world champion. And I think people would have been like, you know what? Okay, cool. Makes sense.
I think he was the last good example of a monster heel. He and Cena tore it down at the Royal Rumble in the Last Man Standing. He beat the crap out of Jeff Hardy. He was used as a top guy right up until he left us way too soon.
Like a lot of people on this list, but yeah.
Fucking good, man.
Yep, super athletic, very quick on his feet for a guy of his size. But the way that he would charge at someone with the hip attack in the corner, that was just savage. And he was savage in every respect of his character and gimmick. And like he would fly off the top rope with diving headbutts. He would take ridiculous bumps, like giant splashes through announce tables and big throws from like wrestlers of a similar height and build as him. And yeah, you can say what you want about the Samoan Spike. It's a bit of a gimmicky finisher, but you know he was a bit of a huge gimmick really, and he had a mouthpiece for him when Armando Estrada, so that really fit into the whole savage narrative they were putting together for him. And yeah, he had a lot of really good matches. I think that I wouldn't advocate for him to be put on the Mount Rushmore, and out of the four names I mentioned, he's probably the lowest of there. Not just because he does have a great deal of ability, but he never really reached like mega heights. The run was too short. I don't think a lot of people recall him easily. But still a great guy for his time period.
Yeah, another person that I think would be landing in that B or C tier instead. I would love to be like, man, you know, former at least WWE champion and main event guy that we might be looking at WrestleMania and such and all that for this person, for Keith Lee. Hasn't worked out as well. In ring wise, Keith Lee is easily one of my favorites that could be talked about in there. I love when I see Keith Lee in the ring. So far, he hasn't accomplished enough for me to boot some other people off this list, like a Mark Henry, in favor of Keith Lee. But I'm just a huge fan of him, so I do agree that he is somebody that can be brought on to that discussion and like, come on, do it. Be that guy, you know?
The thing is, with Umaga, he had a short run. And that short run is enough to get him in, like, wow, one of the greats. I think Keith Lee still has a good amount of years in him where even a short run can make it, you go, wow, one of the greats of all time. And I hope he gets there.
Any other thoughts on Keith Lee, Colin?
Yeah. Well, Keith Lee is probably the most amazing big man I've ever seen in terms of just what he can do in the ring. Like, he does have all those power moves. You've got the pounce and like the way that, I mean, to be fair, a lot of the pounce is the guy selling it, just like flying his body over the top rope into the floor. I always remember that awesome spot of him pouncing Adam Cole into the crowd in NXT. That was so good. But he could just do so many cool stuff like the Spirit Bomb and the BBC.
One of my more favorite finishers.
Yeah. And you've got, but then he can just do, like, he leapfrogs over people. He does dives to the outside. He does moonsaults. I remember him doing a Spanish fly or I don't know whether he did it or he was taking the Spanish fly with Dominik Dijakovic, his essentially his in-ring bestie.
Yeah.
And yeah, the stuff that he can do is just, it boggles the mind for a guy of his size. And I think he's slowing down a little bit now. He doesn't do as much of that stuff, or he doesn't do it as often. I mean, he's 37 years old now, and he's also had that whole...
He had a fresh bout with, a really bad bout with COVID. So.
Yeah, exactly. So that might have had a bit of an effect, and he seems a bit bigger than he used to be as well. But I can totally see a guy of his charisma and popularity and just the sheer ability he can do in the ring. I could totally see him being an AEW champion, or like at least a mid-tier, like not North American,
TNT or All Atlantic.
Yeah, All Atlantic. Yeah, that sort of level, definitely. I mean, I would hope that he might have been a tag team champion at some point, but I don't think that's likely to happen now. But I think that he is just an absolutely outstanding talent. If we're going just by super heavyweights, which is the best in the ring, I'd say Keith Lee is probably head and shoulders above pretty much anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But in his overall stature on the wrestling landscape, I don't think he's there. There are people definitely ahead of him, but I think that just from a visual perspective of watching matches, I'd watch his matches over pretty much everyone else that we've discussed and probably will discuss going forward.
Right. Yeah, I think we can all agree on that.
All right, how long are we going to go without talking about the Big Show?
He's on the list.
Well,
I mean, I will lump these two together. We got to talk about Big Show. We got to talk about
Andre.
We got to talk about Andre at the same time because he is the successor, and I'm not saying you have to pick one or the other. I think that both are well within being in this range of, like, obviously they are in the discussion, if not almost a guarantee. I would much rather watch a Big Show match than an Andre the Giant match, but they're not competing against each other right now. I think both are epitomes of super heavyweights.
The Big Show is so good and it goes so underrated because he could have been so much more. And that's the whole issue with the Big Show, is the fact that he is charismatic, he's giant, he's actually very athletic for considering his size. Obviously, he had periods in his wrestling career where he was like tipping the scales at close to 600 pounds. The ECW run in particular is the one that stands out in mind. Like, okay, that's like the worst example of the Big Show. And then there's all those stories about him having to go down to OVW to lose weight and all of that stuff. There's always seems to be some sort of cloud surrounding the Big Show. But the fact is, he was really good in the ring. He was safe. He was effective. He was charismatic. He cut really good promos. He could tell really good stories. He had so much going for him. But the fact of the matter is that his booking was always so terrible.
Mm-hmm.
They never, like, it's always that thing they talk about, is like Vince saying, "Oh, those guys in WCW have no idea how to deal with a giant like you. I'm going to show you what they can do." WWE's booking of the Big Show was terrible throughout his entire run. Outside of a few moments, like the run that he had with like in SmackDown from like 2002 to 2004 was pretty good. He had a couple of runs towards the end of the career as well where he started to do things, but they would then mix it around with, okay, let's do him a gimmick where he's dressing up like Hulk Hogan down to the ring, or let's do the gimmick that he's a
baby for New Year's,
wearing a baby for New Year's, or
no, I don't know if it's Vince or whoever, but it strikes me like they have a real affinity for improv, and they're just like obsessed with like, no, but I think you can be more, and it's like, oh, thank you, but why won't you just let me be a 7'4", 500-pound guy?
Yeah, realistically, I mean, we'll talk about Andre, we get to it, but if they treat the Big Show like he should have been treated, you should be able to count the amount of losses he's had in his career on like two hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying he should have been world champion all the time, because essentially you could just make it a special attraction. Undertaker wasn't world champion for the vast majority of his career, but you always were interested in his matches. You could make Big Show a special attraction. Definitely he should have won the title, and he did win the title multiple times, but he shouldn't have lost many matches. But he was always losing matches. He was like, it was becoming like a running theme about how many times that they had to shout like, "Oh my!" whenever John Cena hit him with an attitude adjustment. It's like, well, yeah, he's hit him with that like 100 times before.
Now, granted, like when Brock Lesnar first F5 the Big Show at in the Garden, like
the first time you do it is always impressive, but then he's eating that move once a week pretty much after that point. So
hey, you think Dewdrop can get into the KOD?
but the Big Show is still an all-time great, and I think he should be considered that way. I know that there was that period towards the end of his, I wouldn't even say towards the end of his run, like in 2016, 2015, when people were shouting like, "Please retire" at him. Such a big move by those people, because he's given so much to the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Chris Jericho recently was like, "Oh, people shouldn't say that something's a botch." Well, you fuck up. Yeah, it's a botch. But don't chant, "Please retire" at a Big Show.
Yeah. But then we talk about Andre. And Andre is the guy that was, I don't want to say that he was super protected. He was super protected in certain promotions, but he did go around and he did lose a lot of matches.
Well,
but that's just due to
a ton of people.
Yeah, but that's due to the fact that it was the territories, and you essentially would go from one promotion for a few months and then leave. So essentially Andre's entire career for a while was built around the fact of, okay, I'm going to go to this territory, beat up everyone for 3 or 4 months, and then lose a match to someone, and then go away and never come back, essentially. And you can do that. That's essentially the story that you should tell with a lot of these giants. But he was actually a really big babyface in a lot of territories before the WWE run that everyone kind of associates with him, because it was the Rock and Wrestling era and it was WrestleMania, so everyone just pictures Andre in the black singlet with the...
Which is funny, because it's something he did not wear.
Yeah, being slammed by Hulk Hogan, whereas the real kind of peak Andre is the guy with the afro in the wrestling trunks who could do drop kicks and was like actually fairly athletic for a guy of his size. But obviously by the time that you get round to facing Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania, he's in the tail end of his career, both just as a performer and his body is giving up on him pretty much at that point. So even though that's the image of Andre we all see in our heads when we're thinking of him, that's him at his, I won't say at his lowest, but on the way towards his lowest. But yeah, he is a marvel of a human being. It's eighth wonder of the world for a reason.
The eighth wonder of the world, yeah.
And he is the reason we have a list.
Right.
He's definitely on the Mount Rushmore. And for that matter, so is Show. But
I haven't made the thumbnail for this yet, but like, I'm not gonna not put Andre on the thumbnail. You know what I mean?
It's Andre in the center, and everyone else can Sgt. Pepper around it. But like, Andre the Giant is what a giant should be. You know, he had that great run with Hogan, and I don't buy for 5 seconds that nobody knew what Andre was going to do. I think everyone knew that Andre was going to do what was best for business. But like, there is a legitimacy to, if Andre didn't want you to slam him, you weren't going to.
And of course, you know, it's not the biggest, most important thing about somebody's wrestling career, but being outside of the business is helpful. He is the Princess Bride, and he's got this legendary aura around him. Andre, I mean, let's be honest, Andre's going on this list. But
I mean, Princess Bride is one of my favorite movies of all time. So it's an absolute epic one. And obviously he's not the biggest star, but he is a prominent part of that movie. And he's very funny in that as well, when you can kind of make out what he's saying.
You know what else is big? Honeycomb. And Andre the Giant was in Honeycomb commercials. Andre the Giant's big.
I'm going to toss another couple of names out here. Big men, tall men, super heavyweights, etc. that I think we can kind of skip past. I fully expect that nobody would back up too much of a discussion about Braun Strowman. I was a big fan of him in WWE at the time, but they're a bigger fish to fry.
That said, Show did a lot of work to put his ass over.
Strowman should have been a bigger deal, I think, but
it is an interesting one because when you look at accolades, that's a big man that did become the world champion.
At WrestleMania,
yeah, against Goldberg.
Goldberg's another person on this list as far as big men.
As far as big men, yeah, I think he's up there.
Is he?
I think so, isn't he?
It's the aura, though. It's the.
I don't class him as like. Is he like 6'5", maybe?
I just assumed that he was. Let me double check.
I don't think he's a super tall guy.
Oh, 6'4".
Yeah, so I'd say he's probably smaller than Triple H.
All right,
you know what? Kudos to him, but he's not getting on the list.
Yeah, disqualified list. I'm gonna put on here because you technically speaking, if we're doing a cutoff or whatever, maybe some of these other ones too might be in that. Like Kurgan, we're not gonna really.
Kurgan's super tall, but yeah, he's definitely not gonna be. He's not worse, but yeah, he's not gonna be on any of the actual Mount Rushmore one.
Ezekiel Jackson, we're gonna just brush by him. I thought he was
he's
fun.
The personification of domination.
He's got a great theme. But yeah, he's not gonna be on there.
Mason Ryan, not gonna be.
Yeah, Mason Ryan certainly not. Kamala, I don't think is worth putting on the best or the worst or anything. Abdullah the Butcher.
he's an interesting one. I think that he's a bad wrestler, but he didn't need to be a good wrestler because his gimmick was, I'm just going to wrestle in.
I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, essentially, I'm going to take this fork and I'm going to stick it in your head, and you're going to sit there and take it, and I'm going to lick your blood off my hands, because in my world, transferring viruses and diseases by licking someone's blood is not a thing.
Big John Studd.
Second Royal Rumble winner.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much all I know him for outside of the
Yep.
That's
Body Slam challenge at
the Body Slam, with Andre.
Yeah, so I mean, he just doesn't have a whole lot of accolades. Typhoon.
Does, I just don't know it enough.
Typhoon and Earthquake. Natural disasters. Fun tag team. You know, Tugboat, of course. Not my favorite character in the world, but.
It's essentially Shockmaster and Golga.
Yeah, they've had some really bad parts of their careers. The highlight, of course, of all of them being Earthquake is feuding with Hulk Hogan, but he's just there to be a big man against him. So I don't think that puts them within that merit discussion. Fun for their time.
Tenta was only 27 years old when he was fighting Hulk Hogan.
It's insane, because you look at him and you're like, all right, this guy's 46. You know, like, one of the best examples of, like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Show me that license. Brutus Clay, somebody that we are not going to put anywhere close to the top list.
I could make a good argument for him being on the worst.
As far as like personality stuff.
I mean, as wrestler, like maybe not so much as the Brutus Clay, because he wasn't great, but he was okay in WWE. Tyrus though is a whole nother story.
I will say I've never seen a single Tyrus match.
You're pretty lucky in that regard.
He's the NWA television champion, and he wears that belt every night on Fox News.
He's the current champion?
Yes.
Yeah, I think he's been champion for must be over
champion
a year
for
now.
A year? Yeah.
And he just has terrible match after terrible match.
And then he wears the belt on Fox News.
Tensai, Matt Bloom. I don't know if he fully counts, but he might. He might not be within that range.
I think that A-Train, Albert, however you want to refer to him, Giant Bernard. It's like he's it's a weird one. The fact that he's obviously a big deal in today's landscape because he's head trainer at the Performance Center, so like he's got that lineage attached to him. But he was just always just a guy that it's Prince Albert, we're teaming with Droz. Okay, that has to end. Let's put him with Test, have TNA, but it's really just a vehicle to get Trish Stratus over.
Yeah.
Okay, let's put him in X Factor then, because we need to give X Pac something to do, because we have no idea what to do with him now that he's no longer in DX. Okay, let's make him A-Train. A guy that is A-Train.
Yeah, he's one of those forgettable types that he can have a good match and everything, but he just I think if we were doing a Sporkle quiz, he'd be somebody that could be forgettable.
However, he was Intercontinental Champion.
A forgettable person to be Intercontinental Champion if I'm naming them.
His big success was realistically when he was in New Japan. It was like I think he was IWGP Tag Champions with Kyle Anderson for a while.
Would have been a founding member of Bullet Club, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's I definitely wouldn't feature on either the top or the bottom list.
One Man Gang or Akeem.
Okay.
I think One Man Gang is a great name for a wrestler.
Yeah. Akeem.
That's
a little different. Akeem, the African Dream.
Mount Rushmore of most racist WWE gimmicks. That can fit into there.
It was not a rib, supposedly.
I'd feel bad if I said that we should put that under worst. But at the same time, Akeem, the African Dream,
I mean, in the same way, I don't really want to put Bastion Booger on there because Mike Shaw had a career outside of that stupid gimmick. I don't really want to put One Man Gang in there for having been given a really shitty and problematic gimmick.
Speaking in the same, you talk about the big guys with Akeem. There's Big Boss Man to talk about.
Hey, Boss Man. He's an interesting one because he had a really good run, obviously, in the 80s and early 90s of WWE as both a heel and babyface as the actual cop Big Boss Man. But then I'm more familiar with his revival as this security guard Boss Man that was in the in the corporation and would wrestle with the shades on. Had that feud with the Big Show where he forced Big Show to ride on his public.
See, Big Show had some range there. That Big Show.
It was, yeah. I think Bob Boss Man was super charismatic. Obviously, I don't recall any super matches that he had, but I think he's a really big character.
Big Boss Man is one of those examples to me that I kind of lump in that same range of the Rocky movies, where I'm like, the progression makes so much fucking sense that I don't know how I didn't see that coming when I was watching previously. Because if you look at Big Boss Man originally, he's a heel and he is a cop, and you're like, well, what? But then he becomes the good guy cop because it's in a time frame where it's like, oh, cops are our friends and everything. Of course, the little kids are going to want their little billy club, and they're going to be like, hey, you got to stay in line because the cop is here, and he's, we're playing cops and robbers and that kind of shit. You start getting into the different time frame in the 90s, and people are like, I think he can be kind of a dick. And then you get this, he's still a big guy, but he's doing the security thing, and he's, if anybody follows Batman villains, Lockup, it's a great example of this, where it's just like, now you're turning it from being a cop and protecting and serving people to that you just want to dish out punishment. I thought he was a great character. He's not on my Mount Rushmore, but he is somebody who I think doesn't get brought up in discussions as much as maybe he should for certain things.
Hulk Hogan slammed him off top of the cage on Saturday Night's Main Event, and I think that's pretty cool. As far as Hulk Hogan's spots in the 80s, I think that's about as high risk as they get. So, Boss Man was a really great worker. Boss Man was a really fun character. I wish he had done more.
I don't know if I can say that I would have ever wanted him to be the world champion or anything, but I could have pictured him as Intercontinental Champion, maybe.
Yeah.
Tag champs, We gotta talk about this guy. Of course. That's what we're bringing him up for. Samoa Joe.
I don't think he's big enough.
Really? What is his weight?
How much does this guy weigh?
Samoa Joe weighs
310.
I know what Scott Steiner.
Yeah, 310.
Wow.
I know what Scott Steiner thinks.
Yeah, he's 310 and 6'2". He doesn't qualify for either.
Wow, I didn't realize that. All right, well, Samoa Joe, that's a disqualification, but not through.
You're on our favorite of all time, Mount Rushmore.
Yeah,
you're the man.
In the same vein, we can't say Dusty Rhodes.
Oh yeah.
Too svelte.
I know what Scott Steiner thinks
for this.
There's a phrase I didn't expect to hear today. Dusty Rhodes is too svelte.
Yeah.
I mean, they're in that range where people could be like, oh, well, you're nickel and diming this or whatever. But we do have so many other people on this list, so we have to figure out some sort of qualifiers to be like, okay, disqualification on this person, whatever. But Dusty Rhodes, a big man who was super over with the crowd and, a major name and everything, Hall of Fame legend. But let's see what else we got as far as big men that aren't necessarily super heavyweights. I've got Sid, Batista, and Kevin Nash on this list.
Nash is fantastic. Sid
not got to name Mount Rushmore I'm involved in.
Well, that's okay, because I might have Tony here.
Mount Rushmore of Click members. You're not going to put him on
Uh,
there is the one omission.
There are 4 other members of the Click. I think you'll find. Like Mount Rushmore of Hair Flicks, maybe that.
He's the shit. I'm telling you.
I do like Nash, as everybody knows here. Sid's another one. Like I gotta say, like a Vader or Bam Bam, where you just look at that guy and you go, "That's a fucking pro wrestler," and he's hysterical. Maybe that's not what you're looking for in your big man, but I think every time Sid says anything, it's funny.
It's such a great fucking promo with the everyone knows.
Shit. Like
they're half the man that I am, and I have half the brain that you do.
And then you gotta give him credit of he's been 2-time WWE champion. He only competed at 2 WrestleManias and he closed them.
True.
So
one against Hogan and one against Undertaker. Man. Like not even against no names or anything.
Like Sid's the fucking man. When you break it all down as to what the business is supposed to be, Sid's the fucking man.
Who's man?
That's it. There you go.
And Batista is in that range of like.
I will say before we get into that, Batista doesn't qualify.
Oh, he's not. Doesn't meet the height requirement.
You mean to tell me that Drax the Destroyer does not meet the requirements for a big man?
He's 6'4".
Huh? What does Razor?
I think he's 6'5".
Yeah, I think that would still be. We'd still class that as probably a bit too short. Let's see, Razor Ramon. Who we got?
Wikipedia has him as a 6'7".
That's his build height, yeah. So if we are classing 6'7", but I don't know that's the same height as Hogan.
I mean, he was big Scott Hall.
Mm-hmm. I would lean more towards.
No, he was the medium-sized man. How can you be
true.
a big man?
Well, when you're next to 7-foot Kevin Nash, yeah.
Razor Ramon's not somebody that I instantly think of when somebody says the big men in pro wrestling. So I probably would be like, look, realistically, I'm going to go Undertaker and some other people over him. But I mean, Razor's fucking awesome, so I could always just talk about how much I love Razor.
We talk about one of the worst ones quickly.
Oh, easily.
The Yeti.
The Yeti.
Why did they say it like that?
I don't know. So it's Ron Reese essentially. So that's both the Yeti and then also Reese, who was part of Raven's flock as well in WCW.
You know what he was? Big.
But yeah, I'd say he qualifies as one of the worst ones. I mean, the Yeti is one of the worst. Like just a guy dressed up in a giant mummy costume who for some reason called the Yeti.
Yeah, doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Coming out and squeezing Hulk Hogan at the end of Halloween Havoc 95.
That's the most action Hulk Hogan's ever gotten on Halloween night.
No, you have to ask her Bubba the Love Sponge's boy, probably. About that.
Oh God.
Yeah, I mean he's got to be on the list of the worst.
Yeah, he must be one of the worst ones. I'm trying to think of anybody else that might class in the worst. There are a few. There's nothing that's really sort of super standing out. I mean, Kurgan's Kurgan. Like
Giant
really
Silver.
That
good things are good, and Kurgan is Kurgan. Like,
Giant Silver, maybe he seems like he's too much in the mold of.
He's so blah.
Yeah, he was kind of just in the mold of Giant Gonzalez, maybe slightly better. But he was essentially like he had like matches with Great Khali in New Japan that was shit, but it was just the fact they were just two big guys.
What about the Great Lion? The one, you know, the one that had the match at the Noki. Like the 7-foot Indian dude that like couldn't do anything worth a damn.
Raja Lion,
yes.
Yep. Again, one of these guys that just isn't very good, but yeah, he was just apparently he just looking at it here, so he would find later success as an actor and would eventually work as a security guard at a Dubai supermarket.
Huh.
After his wrestling career didn't go anywhere. I want to mention a couple of British ones, if I may. Giant haystacks.
I think that has to. That's like a legacy award nominee kind of. Like that has to go somewhere.
Yeah, so it's his build weight of 686 pounds, 6'11", just this absolute behemoth of a man. He wrestled in WCW towards the end of his, well, not just the end of his career, but the end of his life again. Again, it's one of these things that with these wrestlers in particular, the fact that they're giants as well does kind of shorten their life expectancy. But yeah, he was like an absolute legend in the British wrestling scene, along with Big Daddy. He was also like his tag team partner, and then also his
the
biggest feud they had. No,
not Adam Sandler, Tony. Thank you.
No, Shirley Crabtree was Big Daddy's name.
So Big Daddy, is he not like the Hulk Hogan over there, or was at a time?
Yeah, at the time when British wrestling was like at its absolute peak in terms of you'd literally have like half the country watching shows at that point in time. He was probably the biggest star during like the 70s and 80s, and then he came over to WCW and wrestled as Loch Ness, one of the group of Dungeon of Doom members that Hulk Hogan fought his way through at the start of his time in WCW. But yeah, that's I don't think you'll go on either list, but it's just like a big name to mention from the British scene.
I've got only 2 other people on my list to mention. And we didn't really get into this whole aspect of it, but there's big women. Awesome Kong, Dewdrop.
Just say Bertha Faye because you want to. Just come on.
I mean, she is big, so yeah.
I mean, you could say Aja Kong. Maybe she's too small.
Aja Kong's fantastic. I'll put her on a Mount Rushmore just because it's great.
I don't know if we're gonna end up having enough to do a best and a worst of the big women, but
I think we just did the best.
I mean, Awesome Kong would be in the best, obviously.
Yeah, definitely.
But,
yeah, Dewdrop's one of the best.
Dewdrop, Aja. And jokes aside, I think Bertha Faye was actually pretty good.
She was good in Japan. Yeah, then she came to WWE and they put her in those.
They put her in polka dots and they decided, hey, let's stick her with Harvey Whippleman.
I mean, you could look at some worse ones. You may be thinking about like actually Nyla Rose would count as on that category as well.
I mean, Nyla Rosewood, Nia Jax.
Yeah.
Is, I mean, we're potentially making worse lists. I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, you can look at that woman in NXT that didn't make it into the actual show.
Oh, the Amazon chick.
Yeah, Isis the Amazon, Aloisa, I think they called her. You have Rosie Lotta Love. Not particularly.
I feel like we've referenced her recently.
Might have been some kind of an NXT thing.
Tony made a stupid joke about it, I think.
I mixed up somebody's name or whatever. Yeah.
You got a Roxy Lotta Love when we were talking
about.
Okay.
Yeah, Roxy Laveau and Roxy Lotta Love. Yeah.
What was her name when she came into the Mae Young Classic?
Something with an S. But she was significantly less. Yeah, she was smaller.
Yeah.
There was still a lot of love, but there wasn't a lot of love.
Sage Beckett.
Sage Beckett, there you go, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know whether I would feel like there's enough to really go for an entire list of big men and big women. Or no, just big women in general. I mean, I'd say that Awesome Kong could definitely be part of just the overall contender for just an overall super heavyweight one. I mean, I don't know because like none of them
she's the best
count.
Big woman of all time.
It's hard to say because obviously there might have been some big women's wrestlers in. Obviously, we have Aja Kong, but there might be some other big women's wrestlers in Japan that we're not aware of. As far as I know,
I'm looking at a list right now that names some people that I'm not aware of: Klondike Kate, Betsy Ruth, Reggie Bennett. Becca Swanson. They have China on this list.
Yeah.
Kyoko Inoue. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Kaoru Ito. We have Jessica Havoc on this list. Aja Kong. Dump Matsumoto. They do have Mount Fiji on this list.
No. No glow. on anything.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I don't know whether we'd be able to put like a full one together.
We would at least, if we were going for best, we would at least have Awesome Kong.
Yeah,
Aja Kong.
And Aja Kong makes sense. Doudrop makes sense because even though she hasn't accomplished tons, she's still just better.
She has outside WWE, like ICW Women's Champion, all that stuff. So yeah, I'd still class her. She's definitely a really good wrestler. So
then I don't know. I mean, you got Bertha Faye, you got Nyla Rose, you got Nia Jax. Like, if we want to throw one of them in there.
I'd say Jessica Havoc is high up there as well.
Havoc is great.
I don't think I've ever seen a single one of her matches.
Former Impact Women's Champion, so she's won some big things as well. But I almost feel like it's as much as really, because I just don't think we would definitely need to include more Japanese women in that, and I don't think we have a strong enough knowledge of that aspect. But out of what ones we know, I'd say the 4 best ones would be Awesome Kong, Aja Kong, Doudrop, and probably Nyla Rose, I'd say. AEW Women's Champion. She's really good in the ring.
I like Nyla. I could live with that.
Even though I can't be like signing off on her in-ring presence and all that, Nia Jax has accomplished more, so I would vote Nia over her. But I'd be better off with Bertha Faye even. Maybe we'll just put that as like a question mark thing. We don't, we make our own fucking rules. So that leaves 3 other lists. Best super heavyweights for the Mount Rushmore of big men that doesn't necessarily have to be a super heavyweight, and the worst. I think it's probably easier at this point for us to narrow down the worst. We have a couple that were in that range. We've got Mabel, Bastion Booger, Great Khali, Eli Cottonwood, Giant Gonzalez, the Yeti. If we wanted to put Akeem in there for that gimmick. Abdullah the Butcher.
I'm putting him on worst.
Yeah, I would put Abdullah on the worst. I'd say Mabel, definitely.
Gotta send you guys that list of people on Skype, just so keep track of that. I think Gonzalez has to be on there.
Yeah. Sadly, but yes.
Yeah, Giant Gonzalez, definitely.
I think Eli Cottonwood should be on there.
If Calum signs off, then I will, but like I don't remember him enough.
I think Yeti should be on there, then I think maybe Mabel. But I'd be cool with Bastion Booger, I'd be cool with Great Khali. And I'd be cool with either of them potentially beating out somebody else on the list too, but like if we wanted to go like, Eli Cottonwood doesn't make that much of a difference. But then again, Great Khali, he had better matches overall and he won a championship, so he can't be as worse as Eli Cottonwood. So
I'd say if we limit strictly the gimmick of Bastion Booger and don't sully the good name of Mike Shaw.
Yeah, if it was just Bastion Booger, not Mike Shaw.
That's one of the worst, because who the fuck thought that gimmick would be? Anyways, I can really see Bastion Booger main eventing WrestleMania.
And he's one of those few people that just didn't get in a Royal Rumble because.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd say Giant Gonzalez, definitely. Bastion Booger we can put in. I think Mabel should be on this. I really think that Mabel should be on it, because it's the longevity of Mabel as well that makes it almost even worse. The fact that he was there for so long, and I still can't think of a single good match he ever had.
I'd be cool with Gonzalez, Booger, Mabel, and Yeti.
Yeah, I could go with that.
Because, I mean, Yeti is like, yeah.
Whoa, what kind of sentence is that? Like, Gonzalez, Booger, Mabel, and Yeti.
The giant Booger and Yeti Mabel. Big Daddy Yeti. All right, so we got a women's list. We got a worst list. Let's try to narrow down these big men and super heavyweights. There's a couple approaches
on my list. Big men.
We could potentially do it in a couple different ways. One way we could do is Mount Rushmore of super heavyweights means necessarily like large, and then Mount Rushmore of big men means tall. Obviously, big men does not mean super heavyweight 100%, but then it's a catch-all term, so it's like the Mount Rushmore of big men does include super heavyweights, but super heavyweights doesn't include just the tall guys. It's one of those, math problems where, all of A is B, but not all of B is A and such. So I guess we should technically call this episode the Mount Rushmore of big men, or big men and super heavyweights. Somebody like Undertaker is not going to be on the super heavyweight list by any means, but he's got to be on the big men.
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say him and Kane are pretty.
Yeah.
For the big men one.
I think those two for that. I think at least how I currently had them mapped out, maybe we can move them around a little bit. Vader is only on the super heavyweight list. Yokozuna is only on super heavyweight. Mark Henry is on super heavyweight. Bam Bam's on super heavyweight. Rikishi, Umaga, Keith Lee. But then there's Big Show, Andre, and Braun Strowman, who I don't think is probably going to make it on the list. But hey, different accolades and everything too. I don't know if we would constitute them super heavyweights, big men, where they might fall.
They're super heavyweights because they're over the 350-pound thing.
We could get away with it as far as the height, though. We could get away with being like, all right, if we needed to say, with Big Show, for instance, we could be like, all right, we want to give a spot to Bam Bam and we don't have room for it, but let's put Big Show on the big men list. Possibility.
That'd be dumb. Big Show is a super heavyweight, and he needs to be. He needs to be on the Mount Rushmore alongside Andre.
I'll send you this this working list as well that we've got going on here.
So
other people in that big men discussion: Giant Baba, Hulk Hogan, Tycho Sid, Kevin Nash, and Razor Ramon. But I don't think we're going to go with Razor, for instance.
Baba needs to be on something.
I think Barber's in the Mount Rushmore of big men.
And I can potentially sign off on that. I'll move him into the number 3 spot for now.
And then I would say Hogan or Nash.
It's whether we class Hogan in it. Because it's whether we decide to stick with this 6'7" cut-off point, or because if we have to say, okay, we're switching it to 6'8", then Hogan becomes ineligible. Whereas Kevin Nash is close to 7 foot.
He's more of a 6'11".
He's more of a big man than Hogan.
And he's such a notable big man too. One of the very few big men that has great presence.
I mean, when you do those they did those NWO vignettes, it's always Hogan was the smallest guy out of the 3 of them. Even though he's obviously an absolute behemoth of a man compared to pretty much every other man. It's still Kevin Nash is the big guy out of that group.
I would lean more towards Nash or Sid than Hogan or Ramon, if not just for the height difference.
I definitely wouldn't sign off on Sid being one of the best big men. And to be fair, I don't like Nash in the ring, but Nash has way more charisma. I think he had. It's weird. He didn't have as many accolades in WWE because Sid is a 2-time WWE champion compared to Nash's one, but Nash is also multiple-time WCW champion. So.
Like Nash, Sid has more in the sense of he won the title twice, but Nash won everything in 12 months.
I'd probably go more Kevin Nash than Sid. Yeah.
I think
and he has a bigger deal with the NWO, and he's been in the Clique and everything, and
I'm satisfied with Taker, Kane, Nash, and Baba.
Yeah, for the big men, yeah.
I could see that working. We might revisit it based off of that whole, do we go with some other kind of thing? But I don't think that we will. So then that would mean on the super heavyweight list, we've got Vader, Yoko, Mark Henry, Bam Bam, Rikishi, Umaga, Keith Lee, Big Show, Andre, and then the very extreme chance that we wouldn't put Braun Strowman on there. So we've got
Andre, Vader, Bam Bam.
Yeah, what is it? 10 names that are on this potential. So we could always do, a B and a C tier or something. Well, we can't do a B and a C because we don't have enough for that. But yeah, we could do definitely an A and a B tier, and then just have 2 people left over.
Those 2 people would be Keith Lee and Braun Strowman.
I'd put Keith Lee over Umaga.
I could live with that.
I'm gonna say Umaga is a B tier guy. I'm gonna say. Well, all right. Andre's definitely.
Yeah, Andre's definite.
Andre and Big Show.
Big Show are definites. So then it becomes out of those. I would definitely say Rikishi and Umaga are B tier, and then that would leave Vader, Yoko, Henry, and Bam Bam for the 2 top and the 2 B tier spots.
Yoko and Henry on B tier, Vader and Bam Bam on A tier. Any objections, Cal?
I think Henry's a bigger deal than Bam Bam.
I'm kind of leaning towards the same way. I think maybe Vader and Henry in A tier, Bam Bam and Yoko in B.
I mean, you could say Yoko as well. I mean, Yoko's a 2-time WWE champion and he held the WWE title for nearly a year. Like, main evented 2 WrestleManias.
I look at it more so as Vader beats out Yoko and Henry beats out Bigelow. That's how I kind of look at it. Because Vader and Henry both became world champion. Yoko did, Bam Bam didn't. Yeah, that kind of range.
I do also kind of appreciate the idea of, because we've got Big Show and Andre who are kind of like very similar mold as well. I guess Vader does count in the idea of the more athletic big guy.
I guess
we don't really need big. We
don't need Bam Bam.
So then it would be between Henry and Yokozuna, and
then I would say Yoko though, because Yoko's headlined Mania twice.
He's got 2 world titles over Henry's 1. He did main event Mania twice, and Henry didn't do that.
He was world champion when it mattered. Like, I love Mark Henry, but Yoko was champion when it mattered.
Yeah, that's tough.
I mean, I like Henry more.
I agree with that.
And you've got more longevity with Henry for sure.
Yeah. But Henry's had some... Essentially... I don't know whether we'd... Again, it doesn't really... It's a much of a muchness because it did happen anyway, but I don't think we'd think as highly about Henry if 2011 didn't happen the way that it happened.
Nope.
No, he definitely wouldn't be as much in there because he wouldn't have won that title, and it would have been like, all right, well, he never won the title, so you compare him with Bam Bam and then that kind of thing. But
basically, even though he does have the longevity of Yokozuna, because Yokozuna's run WWE is really like 3 years, something like that in total. But the majority of Henry's run is when he signs to the company and they have no idea what to do with him because he just doesn't work very well. And then he's one of the low points of the Nation of Domination, the lackeys of the Nation of Domination, and then he's Sexual Chocolate. And then he's
Father to hand.
Yeah, and then he's down in and then he's down in OVW for a long time because they're just trying to see what they can do with him. So it kind of picks up for him around about 2006 when they start to push him towards world title, or at least challenging for the world title, and he becomes ECW champion in 2008. And then from there, it's kind of, okay, this guy's a certain big deal. But I still remember those things where he's like teamed with Evan Bourne and they have no idea.
That's what I was gonna say. Like after he has the ECW run, they go back to I don't know, we'll put him with MVP, and then after that, put him with Evan Bourne just cause, like Yoko. I get what you mean when you say you're bored by his stuff, but that's how you push a giant. The way that they built Yoko. He was undefeated, won the Rumble because he's big and who can eliminate him. And then he beats Bret Hart. Yes, he loses to Hogan, but he also is one of the very few people to beat Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, there is the general argument that Yoko achieved more in the 4 years he was with the company than Henry did in his 20-plus year career.
That is true.
So yeah,
if you go with like overall in-ring work, Mark Henry has the edge. If you go with longevity, Mark Henry has the edge. If you go with accolades, Yoko beats him.
If you go with the name, Edge has the edge.
Yeah, that's true. And if you go with what I would assume would be the case, if anybody disagrees, leave a comment below. if you were to say name a super heavyweight, and we were to do like Tap Out, for instance, or play the game, if you didn't check that out, play the most recent episode on the Darkcast, I think more people would bring up Yokozuna than Mark Henry.
I'm bringing up Yoko. For me, it would go Andre, Big Show, and then Yoko would be one of the next names out of my mouth.
I'd be cool with Yoko taking that final spot instead of Henry.
Yeah, I can sign off.
Yeah. So A tier, we got Andre, Big Show, Vader, and Yoko. B tier, we've got Rikishi, Umaga, Bam Bam, and Mark Henry. The two outliers being Keith Lee and Braun Strowman.
Hey.
Mount Rushmore, big men, not factoring in super heavyweight status. Undertaker, Kane, Giant Baba, and Kevin Nash. Mount Rushmore of big women. Awesome Kong, Aja Kong, Doudrop, and whoever the fuck you want to pick between Bertha Faye, Nia Jackson, Nyla Rose. And Mount Rushmore of worst. Big men, Giant Gonzalez, Mabel, the Yeti, and Bastion Booger.
Look at that.
Makes sense.
I call that a success.
I'm always a fan of when we do these Mount Rushmores and we get these multi-list things, because I think that shows more depth than when somebody just goes, who's your Mount Rushmore of your favorites? And then they go Ric Flair and what, the same fucking thing over and over again.
I'll tell you what, we're going to have to find a pretty fucking big mountain for these ones.
Yeah.
They're just going to fill in the Grand Canyon and just call that a day. But if you, of course, are somebody like the guy 123 who had suggested doing this in the future, and we finally got around to doing it, we told him we'd eventually do it. If you have anything else that you would like us to do, always leave a comment, let me know. Shoot me a message on Twitter or something and just be like, hey, I'd really love for you guys to do this. If we don't get around to it, one of the best ways to make sure that we do is the Pick Your Poison tier over on Patreon, or if you click the join button on YouTube, you get access to the same members only content that's over there. So there are different tiers, of course. If it's $1, still helping out quite a bit. Same thing with that little thanks button that's on there next to the like button. But if you want the members only podcasts that we do that are called the Darkcasts, then those you can find on there if you go on the Darkcast tier. But the Pick Your Poison tier is one above that. And that one, you get to go, hey, look, I'm directly sponsoring this episode. It is going to be about such and such. And unless it's something that's completely fucking bonkers crazy, then we will go around and we'll go ahead and do it. And this was not a sponsored Patreon edition. It was just one thing that was on the list of, hey, what can we do? We're on a blank week. So it was going to be this, or it was going to be Superstar Scores, Naomi and Sasha Banks. And I ultimately decided I think that this would make a little bit more sense for our time frame of when we're recording. But if you want to help us out and you want to toss a little spare change our way elsewhere, TeePublic and Redbubble are great ways to pick up some merchandise and to, put a little bit of that in our way and get something out of it, whether you get some stickers, or I'm trying to get them to do, TeePublic in particular. I reached out to them and I said, why don't you do deals that are like, hey, instead of it being like a company-wide percentage off of all products, why don't you do all stickers are 50% off for a little bit? So then way people like me can be like, look, if you want to buy a sticker, now's the time. Or if it's, say, Independence Day just came by and it's, hey, every design that's got something to do with USA is 10% off or something. I'm trying to get them to do that. They don't seem to be really listening, but, it is what it is. So if that happens in the future, if I get any kind of ability to put some sales out there, then I will do that. But in the meantime, Redbubble and TeePublic are there for Smark Out Moment and for Fanboys Anonymous, which you can find over on fanboysanonymous.com. Follow, like, share, favorite, all the things that are happening over there too. I don't know what the next thing is going to be, just because I never really know. Too many things on the back burner. But we got some movies coming up. Nope, it's coming out soon. The DC League of Super Pets is coming out soon. Might do something on that.
That's The Rock in it, so
yeah, maybe some crossover there. And I did the thing about Thor: Love and Thunder. I have been really wanting to get more into Spider-Man stuff and so many other things. So if you see that down the line and you are interested in that too, then keep that in mind. But fanboysanonymous.com is where you'll find all of that content. So show your support for that blue brand, and follow me at Tony Mango all over the place and see what else I'm up to. But also, in the meantime, check out what these guys are up to too. Rob's over there at Dude Felice if you want to see what he's up to.
I am, and while I will never be on anyone's Mount Rushmore of big men or super heavyweights, you can check out everything I've got going on at Dude Felice on Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram, and I always appreciate all the support. Callum, you're not a big man, are you?
Ask your girlfriend.
Bold of you to assume that I have one.
Good thinking on the fly like that. That's good.
Very good, buddy.
Every now and again. Every now and again it picks up. But yeah, you can find me and my big man writings over on the Smark website. You can check out the power rankings where I rank some big men, some small men, some small men, some small women, some bigger women. Up and down the list, see who's top of the tree every single week. And there's also the Fantasy League, where there's some big men like Commander Aziz.
He's big.
And not a lot of men not.
Not a lot of points, though.
Yeah. And yeah, just follow that at either on the Sparko website or go to www.fantasyleague.com to see the latest standings there. And follow me on Twitter at WithMeister14.
Alrighty, everybody. That is another edition of the Smack Talk podcast over here from Smark Moment. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I think that you did. And if you didn't, well, you're wrong. Because this was a good edition. But next time we'll be around with the hot tags. And then next week we start getting into ROH discussion, which is a rarity on this channel. We don't talk too much about ROH, but we got that before Dishonor coming up. So another pay-per-view point week. And then after that, we got some SummerSlam stuff to talk about. After that, I don't know for sure, but probably somewhere around that beginning range of August, we'll be recording that fantasy card for our AEW and WWE mock draft that we did. That might come out the first week of August, might come out the second week, might come out the third. I'm not sure about the planning yet, but I'm going to be away for about like a week and a half, so I got to kind of plan things out ahead of time. But we'll figure that out. We'll let you know when we know. And in the meantime, just keep browsing and keep checking out what's going on at smarkoutmoment.com. And we will see you the next time that we see everyone. Adios for now. This has been another Smark Out Moment, and we are being counted out.